Hello everyone, welcome to another Nature Live Online. My name is Christina, I'm going to be your host today. And thank you so much for joining us. If you've been following us for a bit, thank you for coming back. And if you're new, welcome. Now, if you're new, let me tell you a little bit about Nature Live Online. Now, Nature Live are shows that we used to do at the Natural History Museum in London with a live audience. But since the museum is closed at the moment, although not for long, we decided to bring them online and keep bringing you all the secrets of the Natural History Museum to you in your homes. Now, what we do here is invite scientists that work behind the scenes to come and tell us more about their work and their passion to discover more about the Natural History Museum. And we ask them loads of questions, but these shows are live, so you can ask questions yourself as well during the show. We will try and get through as many as possible throughout the show. Now, without any further ado, let me invite you to our guest today. He studies the Andean bear at the Natural History Museum, and he studies their DNA, but there's more to it. Let me introduce you to Camilo Chacon. Hi, Camilo.
Hello, Christina. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today and being here with us today. Now, Camilo, you are our main guest, but we also have a second guest today, a very special guest. Let's see if they are around. Oh, there you go. There he is. Andy Bear was able to join us today. Hello. There you go. Well, that was a little bit of a joke. There's a video of our main protagonist of our talk today, the Andean bear or the spectacled bear. Now, Camilo, you know a fair bit about this bear, not only about itself, but also about its DNA. But before we're starting about it, can you tell us a little bit more about your role at the Natural History Museum, Camilo?
So, okay, I work as a postdoctoral researcher at the Natural History Museum. That basically means when you are a postdoc, that means that you have finished your PhD a couple of years ago and you are continuing your academic career. So what I do at the museum is that I work on the Ancient DNA Lab with Professor Ian Barnes and Dr. Selina Brace, and we, with a big team that we have in the museum, we try to extract genetic material from things that have been long dead, from specimens from museum collections or fossils or remains. In this case, I work with museum collections and especially with museum collections of the Andean bear, like the one we are seeing in the photo right now. This is a cute cub that was collected. Hopefully it wasn't a very sad story, but yeah, he's been in that museum for more than 100 years.
Okay, so you work with really old specimens of this particular bear. I'll ask you more about what you do exactly with the DNA later, but let's talk a little bit about the spectacled bear or the Andean bear. It's got a few different names. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? Let's start, for example, for where does it live?
Okay, so the Andean bear, as the name indicates, it's present in South America, in the Andes, in the Andean mountains. So it can be found in the central part and the northern part of the Andes, ranging from Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, and Venezuela, as you can see there in the north part. Then, as you can see in this map, we focus our study in Colombia, and I will talk about that later. So yeah, we can explain why Colombia. But basically, there's something interesting in the geography of Colombia, and is the fact that you can see that the mountains, they split. So when the Andes reach Colombia, it splits by 3 different mountain systems, and that creates a whole wide array of environments and landscapes.
Mm-hmm. So there's the 3 fingers of the mountains that we could see there, kind of the 3 of them are areas where you can find this bear.
Yes.
And in fact, one of the areas, you sent me pictures of, Camilo, and it's beautiful. It's called the Paramo, isn't it?
Yes. So this is Paramo. It's a kind of ecosystem that is only found in the northern Andes. So you will only find them in places like Colombia, Ecuador, and maybe Venezuela. So they are just very, very specific from that region. And they have a lot of special conditions. They are very high in the mountains, so it's more than 4,000 meters above the sea level, which is quite high. And they resemble a bit like highland landscapes from Scotland or something. So some people may believe this was somewhere in Scotland, and it does look a bit quite like. It's just that the plants and the diversity of animals is like entirely different, very characteristic of a tropical area.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, you might think, if you think of the Andes or Colombia, people might get like snapshots in the mind of like very like the wild forests and rainforests, but actually the variety of ecosystems is huge. So, for example, the Paramos over there is just beautiful. Now, Camilo, let's go back to the bear. What makes the Andean bear special? What is it special about it?
Well, there's many things about the bear that make them special. The first thing is the fact that they are the only bear in South America, the only extant bear in South America. They are also the only representatives of a kind of bears that are called the short-faced bears. All the other species were in North America, Central America, South America, but they are all extinct now. So it's like a bit different to the other birds that are still alive today in many ways. They also have a diet that is more based in plants. They like 95% of their diet is just plants, and they are like omnivorous, but yeah, mostly focused on plants.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. And Camilo, we already have some questions coming from people watching, and we have a question from Facebook. Somebody's asking, what is the conservation status, and what are some of the threats that they are facing?
Okay, so according to the standards of the organization that does this kind of classification, which is the IUCN, the bear is classified as vulnerable for extinction, which means that there's still some hope on it. He's like, they are reaching a critical condition, but they are not yet there. And some of the threats that they are facing, the main ones are to do with the conflictive interactions with humans. So they sort of have to face humans in many ways, and the fact that the habitat is being lost. And then in that sense, there's a lot of conflict between cattle ranchers and farmers with the bears, because they believe maybe they are dangerous to their crops or their cattle, and they end up, killing the bears and hunting them. So poaching, mainly by retaliation for livestock predation, or what people believe they can be predating on, it's one of the main threats. And of course, the habitat loss, knowing that Latin America, and especially that area of the Andes, is highly populated, and human populations keep growing. So it means that they also keep looking for lands and spaces to colonize.
So I suppose it's something that we see a lot on currently when it comes to nature and humans, is that clashing of human expanding and animals losing their habitat and the places where they live in habitat fragmentations. They get isolated in some areas.
Yeah, so and if they get isolated, it also usually comes with the fact that the populations are like reduced in size, and that reduction of a population size is very dangerous if it happens suddenly. If it happens in a very few generations, then they don't have enough time to to adapt to that change naturally, and that can have huge consequences at the genetic level and at the ecological level.
And in fact, this bear has a pretty important role in the environment where it lives, doesn't it? Why is the bear important, Camilo?
Well, there's like many aspects that make the bear important, but like first talking about their sort of biological function, as they eat a lot of plants, they become very good seed dispersers. So they are sometimes regarded as the gardeners of the Andes, because they are basically, they walk long distances. They are big animals looking for food and looking for new territories and everything. And they move around the area by quite a lot of kilometers, which means that they are constantly dispersing seeds in their poo or in their hair. So that is basically like their main function. And on top of that, they are like very important culturally, which means that they are also like the one of the phases of these ecosystems. They are the representatives of them.
I love that you call it the guardian of the forest, you said, didn't you?
Yes, the guardian of the Andes.
The Andes. That's really beautiful. You also, when we were talking about it, Camila, you mentioned, you name it an umbrella species. Has this name got to do with the role in the environment? What does being an umbrella species mean?
Oh yeah, that's a very important point. So as the name says, like that sort of the term, an umbrella, means basically that this species, if we can protect this species, and what do we need to protect the species? We need to keep the habitat as like, you know, as much as possible. And for a big mammal, you need huge places and you need big structures of land. And by doing so, by protecting the bear, you could end up protecting a lot of animals, plants, microorganisms, and whole ecosystems. So basically, the umbrella definition is like usually applied to a charismatic species that also has a huge range of expansion and in a sense helps to protect the environment.
Mm-hmm. So definitely the guardian of the Andes, I see over there. Now, apart from calling it the guardian of the Andes, I think you've touched as well on the relationship of people with the bear traditionally, but also currently. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? What is the relationship with Colombian people and the bear, but also people from all the areas that cover the Andes and the places where the bear lives? Do you know a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's some information that, yeah, of course, has been passed through generations in different cultures in like the Andes. You know that like the native peoples of the Andes are very diverse and they've been in the continent for thousands of years. So they have had many different interactions with the bird depending on how the ecosystem looks like and how close they have got to those specific areas where they live. But the bears are usually, their behavior is a bit, they are solitary. They really don't like interaction with people, so they tend to just run away. But in many cultures, they are always regarded as sacred animals. They somehow are believed to be a sort of a contrast between the life and the death. In a sense, they can be regarded as an animal, as a creature that provides some equilibrium. So they've always been associated with a balance on nature.
That's really lovely. In fact, we had a question from on YouTube that they were asking, are they solitary creatures? You said that they're quite solitary. Also among themselves? Does that happen?
Yeah, they are very solitary. So usually they only get together on the mating season. So they spend a couple of weeks together, you know, like binding there and making the bond. And then once what happens, then they usually get apart again. There's like usually, of course, moms, they spend a lot of time with their cubs before they are like usually like a year or a couple of years before they are usually able to live by themselves. And sometimes it's been reported that they can gather in certain circumstances a few numbers, you know, just to eat or something, but they normally are like strictly solitary animals. They are not very territorial, but they always keep their distance.
That's brilliant. Now, people might have already been familiar before the show with them, Camilo, because they were featured in the last Planet Earth, I think, but also they've been featured in books and films because the spectacle bear, the Andean bear, is Paddington Bear, isn't it, Camila?
Yes, that's also a very interesting thing about this bear, that Paddington Bear must have been an Andean bear, yeah.
Because as you said before, it's the only living bear in South America.
Yes. That's a pretty nice fact.
I just wanted to mention that because it's a bear that a lot of people, especially in the UK, are really, really familiar with, and also was in the museum in one of the films.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Camila.
No, that I actually sometimes joke with it, like just saying that Paddington and I have a lot of things in common. We both moved to London from South America, you know, and we love marmalade sandwiches. So yeah.
That's so nice. Now, Camilo, let's talk then about your research work, the research that you do to find out more about Paddington himself. What are you studying exactly? You've mentioned ancient DNA, but can you tell us a little bit more about what is it and how you use it?
Yes, so basically, ancient DNA is the name that in the genetics realm we've given to any kind of DNA genetic material that is obtained from a source that wasn't preserved for that purpose. So in this case, we are talking about museum collections, because these like bones and skins and other things that have been like collected and stored in museum collections, they were not thought to be for this sort of genetic molecular analysis. And the same goes for fossils and like remains from burials and everything. Just focusing on the like museum collections, what happens is that once all these things are stored without the conditions for storing like the genetic material, they go to they get to a degradation process, and with time and temperature and some other conditions, the DNA starts getting very fragmented. And what we do is that we use some special techniques in order to recover all these like fragmented and degraded DNA, and then try to, read across that genetic code, all over the genetic code, and try to get as much information as we can. And then we can use that to make different interpretations and inferences about the evolution, about the ecology, about the history of the organism. In this case, the bear. Yep.
That's brilliant. So you're actually extracting DNA from collections that sometimes are even 100 years old.
Yes, so as we said at the beginning of the show, we have some bears that are more than 100 years old. The oldest one we could collect in Colombia is from 1913, so it's 107 years old. And hopefully after the pandemics, after it eases a bit, we may be able to sample some more collections in some other places out of Colombia to see if we can find something perhaps from the 19th century. And so it's important that they have some conditions like that they know exactly where the sample was collected, exactly when. So if we don't have that information, we cannot use the specimens for this analysis, and that like sort of limits a bit our sampling. Yeah,
that's amazing. That was the question I wanted to ask you as well. Are you using? You're not just using Natural History Museum in London collection, you are traveling to Colombia to collect there as well and have a look at the collections that are kept in Colombia.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a nice photo. So last year we did several trips to Colombia. That one was in Bogota, in Universidad Nacional. And basically the aim of this trip was to collect the samples. So basically what we do is that we take samples from bones or teeth, yeah, and skins. So the protocols, like the procedures, are quite different. So when we take the material from bones, we usually drill small holes into the bones or the teeth, and we get some of that bone powder. And from there we can get some of the genetic material. Or we could like very small fragments of skin from the specimens, and then from there we apply some molecular, like some laboratory techniques to separate all the other things and get that genetic material.
I'm glad that you mentioned how you do it, because we had Telma Costa on Facebook asking, how do you extract that DNA? So skin and teeth as well. That's really cool. I suppose it's a really delicate work. You have to be really careful, make sure that you don't damage.
Yeah, you have to be very careful. And the drills we use, they are very small. So the drill bits are like very small things, and you need to do it at very slow like speed, so you don't overheat the bone, or you don't break the bone, right? And when you work with museum collections that are not so old, that's fine. But sometimes people that works with fossils or remains that been buried for thousands of years, that's very tricky. You need to be very careful.
That's amazing. Now, Camilo, so I imagine that you don't have results, from your research, because you're already doing it, and with the situation that we have at the moment with the pandemic, you haven't been able to access the samples that you have for a bit. But what are you trying to find out with your research? What do you want to know about the bear?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. So basically, we are teaming up with a lot of researchers in both Colombia and the UK to collect these samples, not only from museum collections, but also from bears that are alive nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, and we can talk about that a bit later, but basically what we want to do is to compare how the bears have looked, how the genomes, how their genes, how their like genetic variation has been in the last in the last 100 years or even more than 100 years. And we want to see if there's any trend associated with the habitat loss and the changes that have undergone these populations in the last few decades. So we know from the research that has been done by other people at the ecological level that the animal is like the habitat loss has been quite huge. So there's some estimates that only 30% of the original habitat for the bears still remain. And there's also some estimates that in the last 30 years, like the populations of bears have declined by 30%. So we are talking here that there's a huge population change. And we want to understand from genetics first if we can see some trends on how that those changes in population sizes and on the population, like on the areas where they are located and everything, are creating any problems for them at the genetic level. And that information will also be telling us which populations are more vulnerable to extinction, which populations require more urgent action. So by doing so, we hope that we can inform many like conservation strategies so they can tailor it a bit more to a specific population. So for instance, a population that's always been small, they are probably well suited to be in a small population, and their genetic variation, their like genetic health keeps a steady balance. But then if you have populations that have like a sudden change in the population size, that maybe they just plummeted sharply at some point because like a new town or a new highway or a new mining project and a farm. So they could have had like very serious effects on their genes because they would have had enough time to, you know, to keep the variation that is necessary to be resilient enough to face environmental changes or any challenging situation.
And that's what I find really, really amazing about the work that you do, Camilo, and also the work that all the scientists do at the museum working with the collection. So even though the bear is still alive, you can still study it in the wild. If you want to know more about the past of the bear, you have to go to the collections to actually understand what was happening with the bear in the past to compare it to what's happening now. And that's just really amazing. It's a little bit like puzzling together all the information and finding out more about this amazing animal. Rachel Williams on Facebook, they are asking, how long have these bears been around then? Do we know?
Well, there's not very good estimates on the like initial dates because the fossils that have been found on South America, they only date to the Holocene, which is just like a couple of thousand years in the past, like, you know, like 10,000 years in the past or so. But their relatives, the relatives of the same, you know, short-faced bears and everything, they were around for way longer, and they diverged from all the other bears more than like 5 or 10 million years ago. So it's a huge amount of time. And then, yeah, they've been around for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years likely. And they are only present in South America now, but there's no, like, I mean, there's a chance that they were also probably present in North and Central America.
That's amazing. A lot to still find out. Now, Camilo, you've brushed over it, but this is a work that you're working on this bear at the Natural History Museum, but you're part of a much bigger research project that is a collaborative project as well, isn't it? It's called Grow Colombia. And can you tell us a little bit more about that and how the bear fits in this project that is actually about more than the bear?
Yeah, so yeah, Grow Colombia is a big collaborative project that involves mostly institutions from the UK and Colombia. and also has some collaborators in Australia, and especially for the BEAR project, we also have some collaborators in the US. But basically, the idea is that, as you can see in this slide, this is a shared vision to conserve biodiversity, right? So the idea is that we have many lines of work in the project. It's a huge project. I'm only part of a very small part of the project, right? And it's basically that we want to understand the biodiversity in the country. We want to, study it a bit into more detail. We want to know how we can use that information in order to create more sustainable ways, both to use natural resources, but also to create more sustainable socioeconomic scenarios for the human populations in the country. So this is also all in the line that Colombia is a country that has faced many challenges in the last few centuries, right? And in the last decades, Colombia was in a lot of armed conflict, and there were most of people are familiar with all this sort of troubling past. But now there are some things that are improving a lot. And this is a chance of creating a scientific collaboration that the governments of both Colombia and the UK started a couple of years back. And then some researchers from both the UK and Colombia, they joined together to start this project. So just to give you an example, in the Endiambre project, we have institutions involved in the UK and Colombia, including the Instituto Humboldt in Colombia, which is a very important organization that does research on the biodiversity of the country. Is like a central organization, and then we also have the Earlham Institute in the UK, which is like the sort of genomics huge institute that does a lot of this work, and they have all the technology and all the capabilities. And from the Earlham Institute actually is where the main investigator, the principal investigator of the project has been based for most of this time, and she is Federica de Palma. She is a professor that was able to lead all these projects and put them together under this umbrella of creating a more sustainable way of living for a country. And the idea is that we are partnering with a lot of people in Colombia, and the main thing that is going all across the project, that is like transversal to all the research lines we have, is the capacity building. So what we want to do is to achieve some very nice, long-lasting collaborations between Colombian researchers, between Colombian and UK researchers, and in some other places in the world, and also to train people on some of the capabilities that maybe we already have in the UK, but for many reasons, for money or technology, we still don't have in Colombia. So it's that all about that capacity building and knowledge transfer, and also some of the public engagement. We have a lot of work on public engagement. So we have 4 main things on our project, which is the natural diversity, which is basically the work we are doing with a species like the bear. We are also doing research on cacao and some fish. Then we have an agricultural diversity project where we are studying, the researchers that are involved in the project are studying more sustainable ways of, doing cattle ranching, but also crops and in general ways to improving the standards for these kind of things, new forages, new, silvopastoral systems and everything. Then we have a socioeconomics realm that are in charge of all the valuation of biodiversity, and to try to see how this biodiversity can be used in the best way possible to create better conditions for some populations across the country. And then we have the public engagement, which is trying to find ways to adapt all the knowledge we have on engaging with the public in the UK and engaging with the public in Colombia, and try to make the perfect combination of it. And it's, for me as a Colombian researcher that has been in the UK for a long time, it's just the perfect opportunity for first contributing a lot to the development of new ideas and new research in the country, but also to help and build those bridges between those long-standing collaborators.
It's just I find this project really, really amazing because it's not a purely scientific project. It just builds up in so many levels, and it takes the context of the scientific study in mind in such a biodiverse country that is Colombia. It actually wants to know more about, okay, well, what are the effects of the different things that we're studying with the people, with economic growth, with all the aspects around it, and it's really, really amazing. And yeah, we should find out more about the project as it keeps developing and keep talking about it. Now, so you are not just studying the ancient DNA on this project, right, Camila? You're studying many other aspects of not only the bear, but all the different things that you mentioned. Now, Camila, we're getting more questions from our audience. So, Kevin from Facebook, for example, he's interested in the bear in Incan mythology, or I suppose South American mythology. Do you know if the bear had any role in mythology in the South American continent?
Well, that's a very interesting question, but I'm sad to say I'm not the right person to answer that because I'm a geneticist. I would love to know more about that, and definitely I keep looking for information. I know for the Incas, they were very present and very important, and actually one of the most common names for the bear comes from Quechua, from the language, and is Ucumari or Jucumari, which is like just the name they gave to the bear. But yeah, beyond that, and the fact that in a lot of like Andean cultures, they regard the bear as this like figure of balance and equilibrium. There's no much I can say about it. I'm sorry about it.
And I suppose since the bear covers such a long range in South America and the Andes, so many different population would have been in contact with it. So I suppose we would have a variety of mythology around it.
Yeah.
That's just me imagine that.
Yeah, because the populations are very diverse. Like Native American populations are very diverse culturally. They've been there for a long time. So, they have created many different ways to interpret nature.
Camila, somebody asked as well, just in particular about the bear. Somebody from YouTube were asking, why do they have carnivore-like teeth if they are mainly plant eaters? Do you know about that?
That's a very interesting question, and I think there's actually again, I'm not an expert on the topic, so it's just what I know so far. The molars, like some of the teeth behind and everything, they are actually better suited for a like plant-based diet. So usually the carnivores, they have all their teeth are very good, for shredding meat and everything. But in this case, they have very good teeth for grinding vegetables and fibrous structures and everything. So there's some ongoing evolution there probably because some of their ancestors must have been carnivorous because most of the bears are carnivorous, but they switched to an almost like plant-based diet. So there should be an ongoing evolution in there.
That's amazing. I suppose the teeth that we see when we see the bear are the front teeth, which are the more carnivore looking ones.
Yeah.
If you look at the molars, then you might see the difference there. Also, there's a lot of people that want to know how long the lifespan is. How long do they live for?
The estimates vary between like 20, 30 years, maybe a bit more. So in the captivity, they are reported to live beyond 20 years but in the wild, I think there's also reports about 30 years or something. So yeah, I personally met one that was 20 in a zoo in Cali, in Colombia, that was 22 years old, and he was still looking very good. So I bet it's more than that. Yeah.
Have you met them in the wild?
No.
Oh, is there something that you like to do?
Yeah, something I've been dreaming since I was a little kid, but yeah, it hasn't happened yet.
Well, maybe soon. You've met really nice ones in collections. Now, another question from our audience. I think this is a bit of a cheeky question, but do they eat marmalade?
I guess it would be kind of hard to find that in the forest, but they like sweet things. They love sweet things. They eat sugarcane. They eat honey. So definitely they would love marmalade if they get the chance to try it.
They like a particular kind of flour, don't they, Camilla? You were mentioning before that they there's one flour that they go crazy about.
Yeah, so most of their diet is based on a specific group of plants that are called bromeliads, and especially one specific type of them, which are called pujas, and they just love it. So they basically go with their claws and they destroy the outer part of the plant, and then they eat everything that is inside, and they eat the flowers. And these plants are also very good at storing water, so they can even get some water from it. So it's like a very useful diet. Yeah.
Now, Camilo, there's a question from Claudia on Facebook. So she's aware of an organization called Santuario Oso de Anteojos, which is like the a spectacle bear sanctuary in English, and they work with the bear in Colombia. Have you worked with them at all?
Well, I know them, and actually we will be doing a sort of an activity with them very soon on internet as well, because we are here in the UK and everything. So yes, I know them, and they are doing great job, but our research is very different to what they do. So even though we would like to collaborate with them, there's no many ways in which we can collaborate, really. So but this brings a very good point, and it's the fact that there's a lot of organizations in Colombia and in South America, of course, but I'm more familiar with the things in Colombia. There's a lot of organizations in Colombia working on the conservation of the Andean bear. And there's also some researchers that in the past have done a bit of research on the genetics. So we know, for instance, that the bears from the southern part, like from Central Andes, are a bit different from the bears of the Northern Andes and so on. But yeah, going back to the question on the Santuario, yes, we know them and they do a great job, but so far we haven't collaborated with them yet.
You're in touch though with many collaboration. Grow Colombia in general is in touch with many organizations in Colombia that they to like create that relationship of like build.
I would like to mention actually 2 or 3 of them, like national, like the system of parks, national natural parks. They've been amazing and they've been supporting our research a lot. They're park rangers. They are collecting samples. They allow like the researchers based at Humboldt to go and collect the samples. There's also a lot of like collaboration with WCS, which is the Wildlife Conservation Society. They have like a big office in Colombia with a lot of people working very hard on it, and some more like grassroots organizations across the country. So it's like a very dynamic field, really.
National Natural Parks, in fact, they provided the videos that we were seeing of the bears. It's thanks to them that we were able to see the bear moving around and popping into the camera to have a look at them. So yeah, thank you so much for them. But yeah, no, it's an amazing project, and it's really amazing to have been able to find out more about, particularly for me, to find out more about the bear through this project. Now, Camilla, I'd like to ask you, it's a bit of a big question, but can I ask you, how can knowing more about the spectacle bear, the Andean bear, can support Colombia as a country, do you think?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think there's many levels of it. If we think from a like more human perspective, the ecosystems where the bird live, they are very important for different like services that the nature provides to people. So, for instance, if the photos that we showed before of the Paramo, they were taken in a Paramo that is called Chingaza, and also the videos were collected by the people from parks. And basically, this is an area of the country that provides a huge amount of fresh water to communities, especially to the capital city. So 90% of the fresh water, the water that is consumed in Bogota, comes from a couple of paramos, including Chingaza. That means that it's a very, and it's also a very sensible landscape, because with climate change, all these like high mountain landscapes are starting to change. So if we don't protect them, if we don't make sure that those landscapes are as unaltered as possible, they will disappear. And if they disappear, a lot of people will be in troubles just for getting water, something as vital as that. And then in that case, yeah, and it's also because it's the only bear in South America, it's the only short-faced bear alive, so only the fact that it's unique makes very worth, conserving them.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. Now, Camilo, we're reaching the end of the show, but we've got a few questions coming through that I'd like to ask you. Now, Leah, who is 9, she's on YouTube, and she's asking how high they can climb. Are they climbers, these Andean bears?
Yes, they are very good climbers. I'm afraid I don't have the exact estimate of how far or how high they can go, but they are very good at climbing, and actually they usually make their nests sometimes in big trees, so it's a safe place, right? So they go high in trees, and usually they are not active at night, which means that they need a safe refuge.
Oh, that's amazing! So they nest in the trees.
Well, they also have they have many different strategies, but that's
one of them, yeah. That's one of them. And I suppose if as you said, they're mostly vegetarian, so they're herbivores, so they might even climb to get fruits and food from the trees.
Yes. Well, yeah. Again, I need to make the clarity that I'm not an expert on the ecology of the bear because I'm a geneticist. But as I'm very interested in the species, well, I have been learning about some of those facts.
That's brilliant. Now, Camilo, that's been fantastic. I think we've learned so much about the Andean bear and about how important it is. But as we said before, your research still has a lot to give to this project. So hopefully when you get more results, when you find out more about it, you'll come back and do another show with us.
Yes, definitely. I would love that. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
But until then, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to say goodbye to you for now, but hopefully welcome you back in the future. Bye, Camilo.
Thank you for inviting me. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye. And thank you so much to all of you for joining us for another Nature Live today. And I really, really hope that you enjoy the show today and enjoy listening to Camilo talking about this amazing bear and the important role that it has in the Andes and in Colombia. Now, this is the end of the show, but if you enjoyed it, please join us for more shows. We have them on Tuesdays and Fridays every week. On Tuesdays are at 12, like today. On Fridays, we are live at 10:30. We have loads coming up. Next Friday, we'll be talking about Darwin fossils. So if you want to know more about that, you've got a date at 10:30 next Friday. But apart from that, this is the end of the show. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time. Bye.